I had no idea they were prophesying. They weren't indeed prophesying.
Perhaps not.
I still don't. And I'm not trying to be contentious. I'm thinking of it from the perspective. If someone came to me and said, "That's not a prophecy about Jesus," I have to go, "Yeah. I don't know. Maybe not." It's I don't see anything convincing about it. The person I see in the psalm is the Jehovah God that everybody in the Old Testament knew, and in particular that David would have very intimately known in this context.
So 12 is the verse then, right here, and it's in verse.
It's an interesting point, Matt, and I think it'd be good to just mention real quickly. What you're saying is true from the perspective of somebody, like I don't think Paul would have used that as an argument with the Pharisees. Look, it's talking about Jesus. But we already established Hebrews isn't an apologetic defense to unbelievers. He's not trying to convince people who don't believe to believe. It's a word of encouragement to believers. And it's a word of admonition to believers. And so we can say, okay, well, you might not win a debate with Richard Dawkins saying, look, Jesus is the Christ. Because look, Psalm, 102 proves it. He would say, no, that's totally out of context. It's totally saying something different. And you couldn't prove to it otherwise. It wouldn't be a proof verse for that. But we, knowing who it is, knowing that all of the scriptures talk about Jesus, already having accepted that as the premise, what can we learn from it? Well, we can learn that he suffered, and we are ready to suffer as he suffered, but he's also in glory. He suffered and God rewarded him. And so this isn't Paul saying, look, let me prove to you that Jesus is the Christ. This is Paul saying, look at how much higher Jesus is than the angels. And this is Paul saying, Jesus received this high position because of his faithfulness. Therefore, and so it's a word of encouragement to believers. So let's not try to think of it in terms of could this be disproved through looking at, and of course it could. And there probably are verses that would be better used for apologetic discussion.
But again, the whole point being, remember who the audience is that you're reading. Pretend you're one of those Hebrew Christians and read it.
Who were suffering persecution from
it sounds very different than us sitting around this table reading it.
Yeah.
To me.
It doesn't entirely resolve it for me because I'm still, when I read this, I just can't get away from.
Me neither, but what I keep coming back to is either way we draw the same conclusions. I don't doubt everything that the writer is saying here, that these are the things that God would say about Jesus.
You believe those.
And to me, at that point in history, if you think about it, especially if this was written by Paul, the scriptures were on the tip of his tongue. This is how they would speak theologically to each other. They would be just like we always kind of reference things that we say all the time to kind of explain something. And so why not draw from the Psalms a particular part of the Psalms that would explain.
It doesn't necessarily have to be in complete context or I know what you're saying.
It was stuff he knew.
Yeah, this is on the tip of their tongues. And so if you wanted to say that Jesus was this, then you could draw from a Psalm to say it.
Oh yeah.
It doesn't necessarily mean that there is this definite connection to that Psalm, and that Psalm was a prophecy of what was going to be connected through to Hebrews. It could be that. I'm not saying that it's not. I'm just saying that. But regardless, we can still believe what it's saying about Jesus here.
About Jesus.
We still come away with the same conclusion.
You're just looking at the writer's style.
And so my feeling is we don't have to prove or really wrestle with this to the point where we're in all agreement, because I think it's pretty difficult to do that.
Thank you. That was helpful.
That's just my position. Maybe someone else has a different view on it.
Well, I agree with what you're saying, that we want to know what the author is saying about Jesus, not so much what a skeptic might say that this isn't talking about Jesus. So.
That makes sense.
And then I totally missed the last one.
Can we read it?
Psalm 110:1.
The Lord says to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool. The Lord sends forth from Zion your mighty scepter. Rule in the midst of your enemies. Your people will offer themselves freely on the day of your power, in holy garments. From the womb of the morning to the dew of your youth will be yours. Oops. From the womb of the morning, the dew of the youth of your youth will be yours. The Lord has sworn and will not change his mind. You are a priest forever, after the order of Melchizedek. The Lord is at your right hand. He will shatter kings on the day of his wrath. He will execute judgment among the nations, filling them with corpses. He will shatter chiefs over the wide earth. He will drink from the brook by the way. Therefore he will lift up his head. And interestingly, it's how David. So
He's a priest after the order of Melchizedek. He's going to get into more detail about that.
Yep.
But I mean, it seems, Paul quotes it elsewhere as sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool of your feet. It's something that Jesus is seated in the heavens, but it's still in the process of all the enemies being subdued. The last enemy to be overcome is death. Death is still around. Even though it's overcome, it's officially been defeated as Jesus rose from the dead. He conquered it. But the final resurrection hasn't happened yet. Satan still prowls like a roaring lion, seeking whom he will devour. Still the prince of the powers of the air. So we're still in the waiting period between the sit at my right hand and all your enemies are a footstool. But that day is coming. And Jesus is already seated. And that's the point that I think, the large point that what the author is saying is, Jesus is seated. He's been rewarded with this glorious position. He's in the heavens, seated because of his righteousness, because God has chosen him, and because he was faithful. God has put him in the heavens, and that's a better position than the angels have. Because the angels are, like he says in verse 14, ministering spirits, sent out to and from. So you walk into a throne room and you see a guy sitting on the throne with a scepter in his hand, and he's got a crown on his head. And you see 4 or 5 other guys, and they're running around just doing busy work. They might be, you don't know what they're doing, but they're doing stuff. What is your assumption when you look at that? Who's
one of those
the
guys
sitting
running
down
around
is
is in
better.
charge.
No, you think that the important guy is the one sitting down, and all the ones doing his work for him are inferior to him. And that's always been true of God, but that's never been true of man. Man has always been lower than the angels until Jesus. Until Jesus was incarnated as a man, a little lower than the angels, now been crowned with glory and honor. Now it's the angels are below him. And so it's like Jesus has inherited this position as being greater than the angels. And that's what we get, and that's what leads into the chapter 2, that therefore, let us pay much closer attention. Does anybody have any questions about that? Is the overall kind of structure of it?
I think the other interesting thing about 110 is verse 2. I mean, it's extremely clear. The Lord sends forth from Zion your mighty scepter.